Hi, welcome back to another edition of the InduSoft video series. Today we're going to cover some tips and tricks. We're going to call this tips and tricks number 2 because we already have a tips and tricks number 1. Before we get started though, what I'd like to remind you is that when you install InduSoft Web Studio, there is a PC demo application that you can run, take a look at, see how we implemented some things graphically, scripting, things of that nature. So there's different industries, features. So for example, here's a food and beverage screen. There's scripting associated with it, going to different web pages, calling up Google Maps, things of that nature, reporting, a lot of different features that we have, and we encourage you to take a look at that, run it, and actually understand how we've implemented some things. Feel free to copy things out of there. Before I get started, I want to cover with you what we're going to cover today in tips and tricks number 2. We're going to do some menuing and some layouts, some trending information, which we have a whole video and a whole webinar series on trending, but I want to hit just a couple of quick points on there, and some defaults and how you can make it a little bit quicker to develop applications, and a little bit about the rotation animation and how to do some things there. So before we get started, I'm going to create a brand new application. I'm going to call this tips tricks 2, and we're going to choose the Windows local interface, which will give us 1500 tags, which should be plenty for this short video. I'm going to create an application. By default, it's going to choose the resolution. In this case, it's the resolution of my laptop. But I'm going to choose a resolution that's a different aspect ratio. And there is a blog post that we have on our website that tells how to choose the optimum aspect ratio, the optimum resolution for an application. But for this one, I'm going to choose 1024 by 768. Makes a nice video size here, and it's going to get the point across. So when I do that, and I'm going to create a screen, and when I insert a screen, it's going to choose that default size, 1024 by 768. Well, you can create applications that are full screen, and that's not an issue. And if you choose this style of replace partial, that's one of many different screen styles that we have. But the replace partial, when one screen opens on top of another screen, the one that is behind will close. And it doesn't have to be fully behind. It can be as little as 1 pixel overlapped, and it will close. And we're going to use that to our advantage in a couple of different ways. But for now, what we're going to do is create a screen that is 1024 wide and 150 tall, and its starting location is going to be 00, which is in the upper left-hand corner. And when we do that, we're going to be left with this header. Excuse me. Now, the header can be a lot of different information. What commonly will happen is maybe customers will put their logos, their company logos up here, or some status information. And we can do some text up here, but another idea is to put a rectangle, and instead of individual lines of text, I can choose the caption field, where I could label and put just text in here, but by using curly braces or curly brackets, I can put values in here. So maybe inside of curly brackets, I'll put the time, and that is a system tag that we have, and the date, and that's also another system tag. We can put the IP address of the computer that is on the runtime, and so I'm just going to put some text here, IP and equals, and then inside of curly brackets, I'm going to put a function that we have, a built-in InduSoft Web Studio function called get computer, if I can spell right, get computer IP, and that because that's a function, it has to have an open and close parentheses, regardless if there's any additional arguments or parameters inside of there. And then I'm going to close the curly bracket. So it's get computer IP, open close parenthesis, close the curly bracket that matches with the other one over here. And maybe we'll have a username in here, and that is also a system tag, which would be username. And finally, if we want to maybe show some security levels, and we might show the upper level of that, it would be group. High level is the system tag that shows the high level of whatever security user is logged in. So we'll say OK to that, and during development, you're going to see that same format that we typed into the caption, but when we run it, it's going to be displaying all the information that is relevant in those tags and those functions. Now another thing that's handy to do as well is to go over here and use one of the symbols out of the symbol library under System Symbols, Buttons, and if we scroll down here we will find Exit. And so that provides an easy way to get out of the application. Now you could add security onto that and make that button either invisible or disabled if the user is not the right level to exit the application. And some other things just to point out while we're in the symbol library, some buttons. You can have the database spy, which is a nice troubleshooting tool. You can, for example, open up Notepad or Logwin, which is another troubleshooting tool that we have. Log on, once you just put that button in your application, it allows the user to log on and change their security. So there's a lot of different features we can do, but for the time being I'm just going to add those. And now when we save this screen, I'm going to close it, and it's going to prompt me to change the name here. I'm going to just call this not navigation, we'll call this header, and click save. And the next screen that I'm going to create is going to be a navigation down the left side of the screen. Now that's going to be, and you can put this anything that you want, but I'm going to make that 150 pixels wide. And because it already has the header across the top, I have to take 150 pixels off of this height. So I'm going to make this 618, and we're going to show this below the header, so the top moves down by 150 pixels. And the left, it's going to stay up against the left edge of the screen. Now some of these numbers will make more sense when I show this to you in a moment. And you can see this here along the left hand side. Now when we run this during runtime, the header will be on top of this. And what we might do is put some buttons down here, down the edge of this, and maybe we'll call this main. And this is only a caption. This does not functionally make this work. I'm going to go back to the command here and open the main screen, but I want to show you, hold off on this for a second to show you that instead of typing this in and possibly mistakenly entering the wrong thing, we'll just pick it from the list once we have the other screen saved. And you can change the colors of these backgrounds and things of that nature, but for the time being I'm going to save this screen as navigation and click save. And we're going to create one more screen, but before we create that screen I want to position and size this next screen because we're going to create multiple of these. I'm going to make a template as the first one. So I'm going to insert. Now this one is going to be, I have to take 150 pixels off of this, so it's going to be 874, and its height is going to be 618, and it's going to be down by 150 and over by 150, and we'll say OK. And I'm going to put, let's see, I'll just change the color of this to maybe a light blue here so we can see the difference. And I'll save this as template. Now, every time we create a new screen from here on out, it's going to be easy for us because that template is already positioned and colored and sized the way we want it. So I could just open up this template and save as, and maybe I'll call this main. And now that has been saved as the main screen. And once we do that, we can create what we call a startup group. So I'm going to close that, and here we have I'm sorry, not a startup group, but a screen group. And I'm going to insert a screen group, and I'm going to choose those three screens, the header, the main, and the navigation. And I'm not going to choose the template. I'm going to give this a name, and we'll call this startup. And the name of this screen does not make it startup. I just want to make that obvious for whoever comes and looks at this application that they can find it easily. But again, the name doesn't cause it to start up. I'll show you that in a moment. Click on OK. And now here under screen group, the startup screen group, which consists of those three screens, we are going to set this group as the startup. And what we should find when we run this is we have all three of those. And you'll see here is the header that we created, the navigation, and the main area. And you don't have to color this a different color, but I wanted to show this to you so you could see the differentiation between these. But now we have some nice status up here, and again you could put the logo and navigation. And now as we add navigation, we add screens, you don't have to recreate that navigation or the header on every screen that you create. So you can keep these kind of as frames, if you will. Think of them as almost like websites might have frames or tables, but then just replace this workspace area here. And you can overwrite all of these and get a full screen display if you want to. So just for the time being, I'm going to exit out of here. But keep this in mind. This is 3 different screens, and it doesn't have to be 3. It could be 2. It could be 5. It could be however many you wanted to lay out. That's an easy way to create a nice workspace so that you don't have to create those headers and the navigation every single time. Let's exit out of this. And if I was to create another screen, maybe I'll create a trend screen. Instead of creating a blank screen, again, I'm going to open up the template and I'm going to save as trend. And now that I've got the trend screen, what I want to do is I want to open up my navigation. And the first time I made this main button, I did not give it a place to go to. I gave it the command, but I didn't give it the actual screen. So back here on the button, it has the text that says main, but here on the command, it currently doesn't go anywhere. Now that we had saved that screen called main a few minutes ago, we're going to go and pick it from the list. That way we don't accidentally mistype it. So I'm going to say OK, and that will go to main. Now, we also have the trend screen, so I'm going to copy this button down. And another tip is instead of just Control-C and Control-V, I can hold the Control key down while I drag this button, and it will make a copy as I'm dragging, and I don't have to go through any extra steps. That's a little bit of a time saving as well. And it keeps all the configuration, so I can already have this command animation here, and I can just change this to go to the trend screen and go back to the button and change the caption to be trend. And that is done and functional, and so now those 2 buttons will go to the different locations. Now, before we go any further, another tip that a lot of people don't realize exists in InduSoft Web Studio is I'm going to open up the main, the header, and the navigation, and I can go to this icon here that says Layout. And the layout is going to open those 3 screens positioned how they were based on the numbers in the screen attributes. So if I go back to, let's say, for example, the main screen and right-click and go to Screen Attributes, or another option is up here on the Graphics tab under Attributes. You can see those different numbers of the size and the location. Under Layout, you can see how they are positioned. And let's say I wanted to make my navigation a little bit wider and my main screen or my template not so wide. I can do this, and it prompts me, do you want to change those positions? I'll say yes, and I can grab this edge here and change it. And when I then go back to my screens, I can see that they're actually wider, and I can use those to figure out how much I want to overlap and change those. In this case, I'm going to go back and change these back to what they were. So this will be 150 wide, 618, 150, and I'll save that. And the main screen, back in and right-click on Screen Attributes and change this back to 874. But you can use that layout to determine how you want that to show up. All right, and again, if you accidentally choose the wrong numbers here and you get overlapping by 1 pixel, the screen behind it will disappear. So if you get try to create this yourself and don't get those numbers exactly right, you might see the header disappear or the navigation disappear, and that's why. Check your actual numbers. So here on the main screen, let's see, do I want to do anything? Yeah, what I want to do here, excuse me, is I want to put a button down just temporarily, and so we can come back to this, and I'll show you what I want to do here. What I want to do is I want to change the defaults for a button. Let's say I have a particular style of a button that I want to use over and over again. I'm holding down the Control key to copy this. And let's say I have a format that I want to use over and over again. Maybe I'm going to create 20 buttons on the screen, and every one of them are going to be called push button. And then maybe you have a number, push button 1 or push button 2 after this. But for the time being, I'm going to leave it like this. And maybe I want to change this to the standard look of a button. And maybe I want to put an image on it or change the font. Maybe I want that to be a little bit larger. And maybe that's what I want it to look. Now I can right-click on this and say Set as Default for New Objects. Now every time I grab a push button from the object, Active Objects part of the ribbon, the group from the ribbon, it will look just like that. So I can, especially if I have a lot of objects to do in a similar fashion, I can define what I want to be the standard or the default, and then come back from there. Unfortunately, at this time, there's no reset the defaults, and that's why I put this temporary button on here, so I can go back and say set as default for new objects, and now that's back to what it was by default. So there you have maybe a time saver for you. The next thing that I want to do is I created that trend screen, and I want to go into the trends and show you some quick things that you can do. If I put a trend object on the screen, which would be here under Data Objects, put the Trend Control object on the screen, and configure the points. Now these will be the pens, if you will. Maybe I label this as temperature. Maybe I'll just abbreviate that as temp, and this will come from a tag called temperature, which I don't have created yet, so it's going to prompt me for that. And I'll just make this an integer tag, and maybe I have pressure on here too. And once we have that, we can go in and we can configure the styles and the colors of this. Maybe make this a little bit thicker of a line. And maybe for pressure, we change this to maybe a blue. We make it a color. We give it maybe lighter blue, and we fill it to 50% transparency. And so what you can see is what that will look like. But what a lot of people don't realize is that these can actually be copied and pasted. So maybe that the pressure is one that you are very close, and maybe your next point will be very similar to pressure. You can actually copy this by hitting Control C, coming down here, hitting Control V, and changing the names of these. Maybe this would be pressure 2, and pressure 2 doesn't exist, so we'll create that. So you can see that that copies all of that information. And further that also copies all the style information and options and the SPC and everything else associated with that. And to further that, you can actually copy and paste this to Excel as well. If you want to get creative and update all of this information in Excel, you can then copy from Excel and paste back into the InduSoft Web Studio trend points configuration. One other thing that I wanted to show you, actually there's a couple more that I want to show you. We're going to actually make this trend work real quick. I'm going to put a couple of sliders on the screen to change temperature and pressure. And for the time being, that'll just go from 0 to 100. I'll copy this down, change this to pressure. And you could, just so I don't make a mistake, I can actually double click on here and pick it from the list. And looks like we have a third one there. I will just let the pressure 2 go for now. So what I'm going to do is save this. Now this is the view portion of the trend, so this will be a real-time trend, and all those points will be lost if I change screens or whatnot. So I want to do some logging of this. So what I'm going to do is go into my tasks here and set up a trend worksheet and tell it every second I want to log temperature and pressure. And once again, I can double click on this field and then choose that from the list and tell it to save every second into the proprietary history format. Now that will cause this to log those points. So I'm going to save this, save it as sheet number 1, and now when I run this, I should be able to go from my main screen, which is currently blank, to my trend screen. I'm logging. I can get some simulation data in here of a temperature and a pressure, and that is logging to the proprietary database format. It can also log to a SQL database format, which you can, again, view our webinar that we recorded and posted on our website and on YouTube if you want more information on that. But what I want to do is step back and take a look at the format here. It's actually stored on your hard drive, and let me call this up off screen here and navigate to the right spot. So it's going to be under, and resize this window here. So it's going to be on your, by default, it's on your root drive. It's going to be under your where your application is stored, which is going to be sorry, it's not there. It's actually under your documents, my documents, and it's going to be here under InduSoft projects, and we call that tips and tricks number 2, and it's actually stored in the history HST folder. So there's today's date, the trend worksheet number, today's date, and which would be 2012, April 23rd. And this format is a proprietary format, but we can convert that into a text format if we want to. There's actually a function, a built-in function to do that. Or to further that a little bit, let me open up another. What we're going to do here is go under C, Program Files x86, InduSoft Web Studio, and under the bin folder where the product was installed, and there is a executable file, an executable file here called hist2text, and I'm going to copy this and go back to my projects and my tips and tricks number 2, and in the history folder here I'm going to paste that in. Now I can either call this executable from within InduSoft using a script. There's a script function itself that does the same functionality of this, or even easier, if I wanted to, I can, using my mouse, drag and drop this onto the executable, where it will then execute and give me back the text file with the values of the data, and the header file, which actually has the tag names in it. And if I open this with Notepad, let's say, it's just going to have the 2 tag names in there, and the number of tags, and temperature and pressure in there. So you can reassemble that and see the value in Excel or as a CSV, or export it as a report if you want to there. One last thing that I want to do, I'll go back to the main screen. Some points to note about rotation here under graphics. What I'm going to do is just place a closed polygon, and maybe I'll make the needle of a meter here, let's say, and I'll make just a little triangle, and I'll right click to close that. I'll go to the properties, I'll fill it in, maybe make it red. And so by default, if you put a rotation on here, in fact, let me go grab a slider out of the symbol library so we can rotate this, and I'll just call this rotation. Give that a value from 0 to 100 with the slider, and now when I click on the closed polygon and apply a rotation animation to it, what it's going to do is it's going to reference the top left. Well, if you think of this as a bounding box around this, it's going to actually rotate around a point that's kind of off here into space. And if we do that real quick, I'll just say that the range of this rotation tag is 0 to 100, and I need that tag in here, so we'll go to rotation. And the starting point will be 0, the ending point will be maybe 360 degrees. And again, it's going to rotate around a point that's kind of up here. When we run this, you'll see that it rotates around that spot that's kind of up there. Well, what we really want to do is rotate it around to kind of a midpoint down here. I'll show you how to pick and choose that. What we can do is we can use this status bar down here that shows when you don't have an object selected, it shows your current cursor position. So what we can do is use that to our advantage, and we can put this object up in the upper left hand corner. You can again kind of picture a bounding box around there. In fact, if we go to format, you can see that we're tucked all the way up in the upper left hand corner, which is 0, 0, and the width of this is 21, and the height of this is 133. So if we want to set that custom rotation point right here, well, it's 133 down, and it's roughly 10 or 11 down here. Actually, why don't I just bump this up, and I'll set that custom rotation point to half of that, which would be the center point here of 11-ish, and 133. So 11 and 133. And what we can do here is set this as the reference point is still going to be up here in the left-hand corner, but then we're going to use an offset from that reference point, which will be 11 and 133. And now I can move that back to where I was, and it will reference, again, from the top left, 11 over and 133 down, and it should now rotate around this position here. When we run this, you can see that it rotates around that position. Now that's a 360 degrees rotation. Another quick tip is, what if we wanted it to rotate pointing left to pointing right? So what we can do is, instead of being 360, it starts at minus 90 and rotates to plus 90. And now when we run it, we get from minus 90 all the way to straight up and down to plus 90. So now we can create that rotation any way that we want to. Hopefully you found these tips and tricks interesting and useful and informative. If you have any other suggestions that you'd like to see on the next tips and tricks, please let us know. And we're going to have some contact information to follow just after this. Thanks, and have a great day.